World War II was caused by multiple factors, including the Treaty of Versailles and the Great Depression. Follow along with us as we describe the brutal events of the war.
World War I, Germany was blamed for the war and was forced to face the consequences through the Treaty of Versailles. These consequences included paying reparations, which was done by printing more money. This just caused hyperinflation. People were angered by the Great Depression. During the Great Depression, many economies failed and unemployment rates rose.
Italy was not given the Adriatic coast by the Triple Entente. Japan wanted to create an empire after World War I and wanted to fuel their industrialization. They did not have many raw materials, which made them want to expand their territory. All of these hopes were further increased by the onset of the Great Depression.
The Nazi Party, which was led by Adolf Hitler, came to power by Hitler making promises to go against the Treaty of Versailles and save Germany. He wanted to expand Germany and take over most of Europe as well as other regions. He began with invading and taking control of Austria. Then, the British and the French gave him part of Czechoslovakia as long as he agreed to stop his expansion. However, he went against this agreement as he invaded both the rest of Czechoslovakia and Poland. He attacked the civilians in addition to his soldiers.
This also occurred in places like Italy, where totalitarian ruler Benito Mussolini used nationalism to make many people vote him into office. This nationalism was based off of people's anger from the Treaty of Versailles, so Benito Mussolini used this to gain many people's support and conquering Albania. He attacked and conquered Ethiopia in an attempt to get revenge for them defeating them in Italy when he attempted to invade and take over in the age of imperialism. He would have his military brutally attack the civilians in Ethiopia.
In Japan, the country began to use fascism and expanded their territory. This is because they wanted to continue to fuel their industrialization. They did not have enough resources to continue to industrialize. They believed that they were superior to the rest of Asia. These reasons led them invading parts of China, Korea, and Manchuria. They tried to gain as many resources as they could. They could not take over China with as much ease as they thought, which led to the rape of Nanking. This was when the Japanese soldiers attacked Nanking by killing as many people as they could and raped hundreds of thousands of helpless women.
Great Britain and France believed that by appeasing Germany, they would be able to end their expansion. They acted on this through the Munich Conference when they gave up part of Czechoslovakia to Germany in return for Germany to agree to end their expansion. The British and the French believed that by doing this, they were ending a large war. However, by trying to use appeasement, the British and French were just making Adolf Hitler believe that he'd be able to get more land if he continued to expand.
Hitler signed an agreement with the Soviet Union to not go to war with each other and to split Poland if Germany invaded it. This was known as the Soviet-German Non-Aggression Pact. Hitler signed this agreement because he was trying to avoid a two-front war, which was similar to what occurred in World War I and was one of the reasons for Germany's defeat. Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union, decided to sign this because he wanted to give himself more time to prepare the Soviet Union for a German invasion. This is because he knew that Hitler was not someone he could trust. Stalin was able to produce more weapons and get more prepared for the German invasion due to this agreement.
I definitely want to attack you. Okay.
World War II began when Germany broke the deal they made at the Munich Conference with France and Great Britain. France and Great Britain said that they would go to war with Germany if they continued to expand. Once Germany invaded Poland, Great Britain and France declared war on them. This was the official beginning of World War II.
And to prepare for a cruel invasion. The French built a trench called the Maginot Line, which cost a lot of money and left French with a little money to use for the rest of their military. Due to the price, they were not able to make the Maginot Line expand on their entire border. They were expecting another war with trench warfare. However, Germany adopted a new method known as Blitzkrieg, which was when the military would send a large portion of planes from their air force to bomb the region that they were attacking, and then would attack it more with tanks.
The French spread out their forces in preparation for a war. They did not expect the Germans to invade through the Ardennes forest due to the lake that was located in it. They were expecting another invasion through Belgium. This resulted in the French being defeated when Germany invaded through the forest using their new tactic. They floated their tanks over the lake with pontoons. They were able to break through the French defense. This meant that the French were not able to defend themselves from Germany's attack.
As a result of this, the French military decided to retreat to Great Britain. They did this realizing that they would most likely be destroyed by the German forces if they remained in France. They believed that by leaving France, they would eventually still have a chance to come back to France with the British support and take France back from German control. They retreated during the Battle of Dunkirk. The British had to ask for all civilians with boats to go and get French soldiers transported to their battleships. The civilians that volunteered did this despite of the planes bombing them. France was taken over by Germany as a result of this escape.
Britain was now on the defensive since Germany was still expanding and was approaching Great Britain. Great Britain was trying to defend itself in what was known as the Battle of Britain, when Germany was trying to bomb them in an attempt to use the Blitzkrieg tactic. The British did not, however, give up. The government tried to keep the people's spirits alive and provide the people with bomb shelters to hide in. This battle lasted for 57 days.
The Germans targeted facilities that made weaponry and war materials as well as food production. They did this because they believed they would be able to starve the people and make it incredibly hard for them to survive. They believed that by ending food production, the people would willingly surrender to Germany. Germany used a lot of resources themselves on bombing.
Despite all of this, the government managed to keep the people's spirits alive. This is because the government would send out propaganda to the people in support of their perseverance. They wanted to keep the people from trying to surrender. However, the British were being supported by the United States. The United States had not officially entered the war, but were supporting the British. They were doing this through the Lend-Lease Act. This act was when the United States had the British purchase weaponry and war supplies from them, but were able to use credit.
This was because the United States did not want Germany to conquer the entire European continent. The United States would bring these weapons and other war materials to Great Britain. The British would gain these supplies that they desperately needed in order to survive through this battle. This was part of the United States slowly joining the war.
Hitler eventually decided to invade the Soviet Union despite their non-aggression pact. This was because he was running low on his own resources from the Battle of Britain. He needed the resources that were being used by the Soviet Union from the Stalin's 5-year plan. Hitler invaded regions where he knew he would be able to get raw materials from. This resulted in him invading industrial cities. This included places like Leningrad, where the Germans laid siege during the Soviet Union's people unwilling to give up. They were able to get some resources in the winter when the lake froze over, but that was it. The people did not want to retreat or surrender because they knew that they would be executed by Stalin as a result. Germany continued to lose resources and soldiers, especially in the winter, which they were unprepared for.
On December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Japanese. The Japanese sent many planes to attack the warships that were docked at Pearl Harbor. The Japanese bombed the harbor. This killed many civilians in addition to soldiers. The Japanese were able to gain information telling them that the warships would be there. The Japanese would even have kamikazes, who would crash their planes into the boats and attempt to sink them. This was an unexpected attack carried out by the Japanese. The United States was greatly angered by this attack and in response decided to join the war.
The United States created camps that the Japanese people would be sent to. This was done in an attempt to prevent any Japanese spies from getting information in the United States. They would have to live in these camps. Both children and adults were sent there. These were known as the Japanese internment camps. In addition, they were meant to make the citizens of the United States not fear spies from Japan.
In the Soviet Union, with the invading German forces, there was the Battle of Stalingrad. During this battle, the Soviet Union ordered that its troops and civilians did not surrender to the Germans. Stalin would kill anyone who tried to retreat. The Germans were able to take control over a large portion of the city and continued fighting for the rest of it. They pushed the Soviet Union's forces back. The Soviet Union's forces, on the other hand, planned a different attack. They sent forces around the city to attack the German troops for their resources. This then caused Germany's forces to be weakened and surrounded by the Soviet Union. The siege that German troops attempted to carry out on the Soviet Union had been turned around onto Germany. The German troops' leaders asked Hitler if he could surrender, but Hitler denied his request. The Soviet Union's winter caused many German deaths to occur, and eventually the forces were defeated. This battle was very significant due to the fact that it caused many of the Axis powers' forces to be killed. This caused them to be much weaker than they were before. They also had a low run on resources.
In France, the German occupation continued. However, the Allies were planning an attack on the beaches of Normandy in France. The Allies sent their soldiers to the beach to attack the Axis powers' troops. This was known as D-Day. There were many deaths in this battle. Most of the soldiers in the first few waves were killed. They were shot by the machine guns that were positioned on the beach. The Allies, however, continued to send more and more soldiers. This caused the Axis powers' troops to run out of ammunition, which would cause them to be overrun. They would be defeated. This was a large victory for the Allies that allowed them to enter France and continue to attack the German troops. This eventually led to VE Day. This was when the Allies were able to defeat the German troops. Germany surrendered on this day. Before this, however, Adolf Hitler and his wife committed suicide and had themselves burned. This was the day that the war ended in Europe.
The Yalta Conference occurred after World War II and was one of the conferences that discussed the establishment of the United Nations and divided Germany into 4 quadrants. The United Nations was created in an attempt to end wars through diplomacy. Germany was also divided into 4 quadrants that were controlled by Great Britain, France, and the United States, and the Soviet Union. This was in an attempt to have the region not be against the West and to prevent a fascist leader from taking over. In addition, during the Yalta Conference, the countries decided that the Soviet Union would invade the Eastern European territories and remove the Nazi forces from these regions. These regions would gain their freedom and become countries after this, and the Soviet Union would not be able to keep their forces there. The Soviet Union was also not allowed to have an influence over these countries.
The United States and the Soviet Union had struggled in an attempt to conquer Japan. The Japanese believed in a fight-to-the-death ideology. This would make it very hard to defeat them if they did not believe in surrendering. The United States and the Soviet Union carried out island hopping in order to defeat the Japanese in each Japanese-occupied island. They were closing in on Japan, but since they did not believe in surrendering, they were very hard to defeat.
The battles that helped to defeat Japan were the battle at Iwo Jima and the battle that took place near Midway Island. In these battles, the Allies were able to decrease the power of the military of Japan. They were able to greatly decrease the power of the Japanese Navy, which allowed for the Allies to have an easier way defeating Japan and attacking other islands. Eventually, the Allies defeated Japan in what was known as VJ Day. They were able to force the surrender of Japan.
The Potsdam Conference occurred before this, though. This was when the United States presented an ultimatum to Japan. They told Japan that they would either have to surrender unconditionally or they would be attacked with greater force. The United States was trying to have Japan surrender in order to end the war. They were getting closer and closer to Japan during this.
As a result of Japanese deciding to continue to fight, the United States sent atomic bombs to Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The United States had been working on a secret project known as the Manhattan Project before this. The United States had many scientists working on creating the first ever atomic bomb. These were created by scientists like Oppenheimer. These atomic bombs killed many people both during the explosion and afterwards due to radiation poisoning. Japan surrendered after Nagasaki was bombed.
However, the Allies knew that they would be winning the war with Germany and Italy before they surrendered. They believed this and therefore met in Yalta during the Yalta Conference to discuss what they would do with Germany when the war ended. They decided to break up Germany into the 4 quadrants. The 4 quadrants were controlled by the main Allied powers. These were France, Great Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union. The original goal of this was to replace the Nazi government of Germany with a government that was not against the Western countries. They wanted to rebuild Germany and make them an ally after the Nazis were taken out of Germany. The Soviet Union, however, was greatly angered due to the Nazi forces causing great destruction and deaths in their country. This caused the Soviet Union to not rebuild it, but instead place a communist government in power. They had gone against the original goals that were agreed in the Yalta Conference.
As a result of Japan surrendering, World War II had ended. The United Nations were created in order to ensure peace around the world. The United Nations had a military that was able to go into countries and break up conflicts, but they would not start wars. The United Nations was not completely successful at preventing conflict. This is because the major powers in the United Nations had veto power. This included France, China, Great Britain, the Soviet Union, and the United States. With veto power, these countries would be able to prevent the United Nations from getting involved in their wars. They would not be able to be held accountable for any crimes that they committed. This is because they could just use their power to prevent the United Nations from trying them for their crimes. Thanks for watching! Had a military that was able to go into countries and break up conflicts, but this would not start wars. The United Nations was not completely successful at preventing conflict. This is because it was blamed for the war through the Treaty of Versailles.